Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another fabulous episode of Healthcare Trailblazers podcast. Excited to be sitting here today with a fantastic guy and a good friend, Alex Maiersperger. Alex is the global principal at a company called SAS. He's also co-founder of a very interesting summit that's kind of a close-knit. I feel like it's the vibe is like a close-knit family and friends summit where you would go to some of these massive conferences and just scoop kind of the cream off the top, put them in a room, and that's what Alex does. So excited to hear about a bunch of things you've done in healthcare. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
It's so fun to be here. Timing wise, I think you're the celebrity here, and I think back to back on Mark Cuban. So congratulations, been a good run for you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. February seems to be my month, but I only have one. I get one a year. So last thing, yeah. But Mark was great. I appreciate that. So let's take a step back just quickly. How did you get involved in healthcare? It looks like one of your first kind of big roles was over at Geisinger Health Plan right down the road from me. So how'd you get involved in healthcare, and how'd you get to Geisinger?
If we go far enough back, my sister studied public health undergrad and was a few years ahead of me and had free books for declaring a major in public health. And so if we go far enough back, it was free books, which everyone that's ever bought books on a college campus knows the allure of, hey, you can do this major too, and take some of my books along with you. But then did a Master of Public Health and Healthcare Administration at the University of Utah. Kind of a bet on that program, actually, at the time. It was not CAMI accredited. It was sort of very nascent in its early days as a MHA type program, and now has gone on to do just incredible things. The partnership with Intermountain and just place in the world where they are with the University of Utah and Intermountain Health and a couple of great startups and different things in Utah turned out to be a wonderful life choice, and then went the route of an administrative fellowship. And again, just I think looking back, there's the famous Steve Jobs quote of, or at least attributed to him in a lot of circles, of you can only connect the dots going backwards and you can't connect them going forwards. Just the amazing time that I happened to be a fellow at Geisinger. It was truly just a unique 2-year program. And the first year was right when I got the fellowship, it was announced that Dr. David Steele was retiring. And so I got to be in his last president staff meetings of the top 20 executives at Geisinger Health System. And Dr. Glenn Steele, we got to be the 3 administrative fellows sort of sitting on the fly on the wall in the room. And then we got to be in the first president's staff meeting of Dr. David Feinberg. And so 2 just American healthcare executive icons who have gone on to do just amazing things. So we got the sort of first person view of all the inner workings of Geisinger healthcare and really American healthcare sort of revolution over a year. And then I've gone on to insurer side, Blue Cross North Carolina, Geisinger Health Plan, and then to the global technology sector with SAS.
Wow. So business side of healthcare, right? Not the necessarily the clinical side. And what an education. That's one way to accelerate your education. That's awesome. And so jumping into some of those roles, what were some things that maybe were surprising to you, shocking to you about the state of healthcare as it pertains? We hear a lot of it from a clinical side. What were maybe some of the realities that you experienced on the business side of things?
The Affordable Care Act was fairly new. And so President Obama had gone on a stump speech, went to Geisinger and talked about if all of American healthcare looked like Geisinger, it would be more affordable, more accessible, faster. So it was an amazing time to be at Geisinger. It had been held up as literally called in the news, a pillar of American healthcare. And so my viewpoint was Geisinger was going to be the place that had it all right. And I was going to learn there and then get it right everywhere else. Nice. The thing that surprised me was a hospital administrator at Geisinger, even in sort of the best case scenario of an integrated system, still has very much so incentive to get people into your hospital and to sort of keep your hospital churning and go. And so it was really almost day one. You're very beat over the head with education system saying American healthcare is broken. You constantly see the graphs in school of GDPs going like this and all the things. And so you feel like, hey, I want to be part of the change. And then you go to a place that this is part of the change. This is the place that's held up to this. And you still feel quite a bit of that fee-for-service machine of American healthcare incentive. And so very quickly, I felt shoot, I might have made the wrong choice lifestyle wise, or I don't know if I want to be a hospital administrator forever. And so I was really fortunate to be, and maybe that was young and idealistic of maybe they're making some decisions I wouldn't or things. And now I understand just how far ahead in many ways that Geisinger is and was. And so some of it was just my own lack of understanding or knowledge. But in some ways, there's still, obviously, all systems can get better and can improve the incentive alignment and can make a difference in true actual health outcomes versus the health care that we deliver. And so very early on, I felt that, kind of took some different routes as I've traversed the healthcare ecosystem, trying to find ways to impact that sort of incentive alignment along the way.
So let's double click on that for a second, because I think that sentiment echoes through pretty much every health system, and a lot of people talk about value-based care. Much fewer people are actually acting on it, and perhaps perhaps now that you say that, the people that are really at the top that seem to express that there's really some kind of, it's not one size fits all. Like from some people that are really doing this at a very high level, like there's time and place where value-based care is the right way to go and makes all the right sense. But it seems to me like there are possibly some other areas of healthcare where fee for service is necessary. And so was there kind of, so let's maybe explore that a little bit. When you came into Geisinger, do you think looking back, it was a misconception on maybe the educational system's part or on your part that, that all fee for service is bad? Or do you think that they were all just talking the talk and not walking the walk?
That's a great question. As I've had time to reflect and think about it, they definitely probably a mix of all of those things, right? I think no scenario is the sort of perfect ideal that everyone's got it all figured out. The one probably most challenging perception from a Geisinger perspective, and I think this has gotten better, but people often think of Geisinger like Kaiser, a fully closed model. And so the health plan and health system are sort of one and the same, serve the same patients. But at the time I was there, it was actually less than 30% overlap. And so most of Geisinger Health Plan actually, or most of Geisinger hospitals actually served patients that didn't have Geisinger Health Plan. Interesting. And so a little bit interesting model that you had to exist in all of those competing models and worlds while serving your own health plan patients as well. So kind of an interesting mix. I think really good-hearted people and really great-hearted leadership. And as I've seen, I think sometimes you're hypercritical of that first place that you are, and then you go somewhere else and you're like, shoot, maybe they had it quite a bit right. And I think a lot of us have realized that as we've gone on to different places, even physicians that I know that were sort of trained in that Geisinger system, I think while at Geisinger felt like, hey, this place has got some problems. And then they went into private practice or they went to some of these big health systems in other parts of the country. And we'd have phone calls or things, and it was like, I long for the days of that we did it like Geisinger. We were really doing it right. And this is how we've got to be able to do things where we currently are. But to your point of the value-based care, just like lexicon of wording, of just different flavors in different places and systems, I think that's probably how we feel quite a bit right now going through AI. Is when you walk through a conference exhibit hall, every company's an AI company, and you're like, what exactly are you talking about? Because your version of AI is different than that. I think you see that in the schooling model of value-based care. So when you talk about it and you just say it's payment for outcomes, that feels really good. And then you go into the different regional flavors of it, and you're like, oh, this population's carved out of these contracts, or this is a little bit different. And what you're talking about is not really the same as what that health plan's talking about. And so you feel that a little bit more. But there are some just famous stories of the misalignment of incentives, both in value-based care and in fee-for-service. And so some of it is great people trapped in a system that's been built that doesn't really reward you for doing the right thing from a patient perspective all the time. And so generally, I didn't find it's sort of leadership that is looking to hurt people financially or health-wise. It's just these are the decisions you have to make, and there's so many of them per day that they kind of compound and add up.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Talk about a misalignment. You mentioned that there's a misalignment of incentives in both fee-for-service and value-based care. Describe a misalignment of incentive in value-based care. Curious. What does that look like?
Yeah, one of the famous ones that I don't know that it's been fixed. While I was at Blue Cross North Carolina, the CEO then was a practicing pediatrician, and he would talk about going to the hospital and the failure to thrive diagnosis for young children. And essentially it was, you would go to the hospital, you're underweight early in life, and they diagnose you with failure to thrive. It's just you're not sort of progressing from a size perspective like they would want. And you would generally stay in an inpatient stay for a few days. It takes a couple days to pump some nutrients into you and to do the battery of tests to make sure that you're able to live that thriving life. And each day of an inpatient hospital stay can be $10,000 or more. And so you're spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on average on a few day stay. And the health plan would reimburse that. But the opposite for failure to thrive, or like the other alternative world that you could live in for failure to thrive, is like buy groceries that are the right things, or buy milk, formula, and different aspects, like give some education, give some monetary assistance, type food, education, all the things. And so like that could be very affordable and cheap. So even in a value-based care world, there's still some of those metrics of, are we getting the right people, the right care at the right time? But some of that right people, right care at right time is like, did they have an inpatient hospital stay? Like that, you're still going to get paid for that in a value-based care world. There's still going to be kids who go through a hospital and are inpatient, even though they could have been. That same story of like air conditioning or things. There's people that go into the hospital because their asthma is exacerbated, and they like the actual alternative in the alternative reality world is like that you could have just bought them an air conditioner and cleaned their carpets. And so there's still those type of incentives or mechanisms that it's very much a contractual thing versus individualized, personalized type future that we potentially could have.
Yeah. And I've mentioned this a couple times on the podcast with different people, but like that's where it kind of starts getting a little overwhelming for me personally, like in my brain. Like the whole idea of like with those incentives, like how far can you stretch outside of the clinical care to address social determinants of health, contextual determinants of health, and different things that are, all right, 1 degree, right? Like patient can't, there's no grocery store near the patient. So they can't get fresh food. So they're getting McDonald's all day. And that's contributing to their health issue. Okay, 1 degree. And it's like 2 degrees. Like, all right, there's a store, but they don't have transportation to the store conveniently. So they can only bring back 2 bags of groceries. And so maybe we get them cars, they can bring back, 10 bags of groceries to feed the family, right? I'm making this up in my head. But like the next thing you know, like, all right, now we're cleaning their carpets, we're doing the laundry, and like that's where it starts getting really overwhelming for me, like on a personal level. Like how far can you take it before we're just babysitting the entire country in with the purpose of creating better health outcomes,
Some of it though, I think we just talk so much about healthcare in our country versus actual health, and we conflate the two and confuse the two very often. There's just so many opportunities that we argue about individual policies. And so even value-based care, you can argue all day about who's reimbursed what and when and for how much and what timing and all the things. And in some ways we'll spend X amount of money on the lawyers and the people and the policy experts and the flights and the stuff to make that happen, when in fact we could do some of those things like the carpet cleaning or the air conditioning. And so some of it, I think our time and energy is misplaced a lot in American healthcare, where we're talking about healthcare, but we should be actually talking about health. I think it's a very much a supply and demand challenge. We get in this argument sometimes on weekends as people that spend too much time maybe talking about health and healthcare. But there's sort of that great debate of like, would you change healthcare outcomes and healthcare costs more by doing X, Y, Z on the hospital side or the health plan side? Or would you change healthcare and health outcomes more by doing the kind of babysitting that you tell about? But in some ways, it's not babysitting at the individual level. Some of it is that structural societal thing of, I think if we were maybe more aggressive on our food laws and the ingredient list, I think we'd probably get better outcomes than like trying to change individual behaviors. And right now we're fighting some of the system with drugs. And so you have some of the magic next version of weight loss drugs or things, which also play a part in the world. I hope that we have some big bets on the life sciences, and I hope bio comes through for us and really solves some real challenges. But it would also be nice, we're placing so much on the cure it would be nice to place a little bit of the bets on the upfront side to say, what if we weren't eating food that addicts us and that does these things to our body knowingly? What if we sort of had a better structure in place and culture in place to be able to eat food that was good for us?
Yeah, that is such a good point. Anecdotally, I was once on a short business trip, and I was staying at the hotel with a business partner of mine, and we're sitting at the bar after drinks at dinner, and it's like 11:30, and this little group is there, and they're like kind of gone, like very drunk. And the guy there starts talking to us, and his job was he was literally an addiction scientist for one of the big food chains. Like his job was literally to sit there and figure those things out, like exactly the exact chemical makeup of what's going to like make you crave this chicken versus that chicken, or this burger versus that burger. And like, now that I say that, it doesn't actually sound so surprising, but it was still super surprising to me that that's actually a reality. There's people that are sitting there in a lab just going like, okay, how do we make this crazy addictive? Like that was mind blowing to me.
I'm probably telling a story that could perpetuate a myth. It's like, I joke we're in the headline era, and so nobody reads the actual details of the article, but I saw just the quick clip or quick article about sort of how social media works as well, and YouTube and different things of the story was Coco Melon, which is for younger kids.
Yeah.
And the story is like the developers of Coco Melon, you put 3 to 7 year olds in a lab, and you essentially have them watching Coco Melon, and you have that like movie theater glass window thing. So you have like a bunch of these data engineers sitting on the other side watching the kids watch Coco Melon. And every time the color changes and a kid looks away, they know that color can't change at that certain. And so much of modern society really is made to get our attention or our choices, our behavior. That Doritos chip, I think, is coded with the exact level, to your point, it's coded with the exact level of stuff to get your brain to say, oh, I can't eat just one, I need two, and I need three. So same with the TV shows we watch, the scrolling we do. A lot of modern society is set up in ways that don't keep us healthy. And so we sometimes are harsh on the healthcare ecosystem of misaligned incentives.
Right.
But I do think it's a health discussion, not a healthcare discussion, is every industry has some sort of bad actors and bad systems set up. And so hopefully that's on all of us to make right.
So I love the way that you phrase that, focus on the health, not just the healthcare. Great little great catchphrase. But let's talk about that for a second, because I think that all these things, and this is also something that I've explored literally from day one, is all of these things at the end of the day, the incentives, the perks, the benefits, this MA plan will do your laundry, that MA plan will clean your carpets, all of that at the end of the day, I feel like is trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem. And the real problem is that it's the incentive structure is built in a way that the provider, the doctor, is the one that's almost responsible for my healthcare as a human. And to your point about let's focus on the health, I feel like we're so far away from that. I feel like the like take chronic care management for a second, and I've given this example 100 times. But like, imagine if you had that relationship with your financial advisor. Imagine the dynamic of a conversation with a financial advisor was that the financial advisor was begging you to please sit down with them for 20 minutes a month to go over your finances, right? You might listen, you might not, you might sit down, you might not, but then you're going to go and keep racking up bad debt on your credit card because for some reason the financial advisor is the one that's incentivized to make this work, right? And I feel like that's how it is with healthcare. Like the incentive goes to the doctor. Even in value-based care where the punishment goes to the doctor, it's the same thing. Like, okay, great. So now the doctor is even more incentivized to make sure I'm healthy. But like, what happened to me caring about my own health? What happened to that as a society? Like what happened to me wanting to exercise and be healthy for the purposes of me living long? And I don't know where the root cause of that is, if it's a result of the incentive structure or the other way around. But a couple weeks ago, went like viral on Twitter. There was like a clip of just like a random street corner in like 1910 or something like that, and it was like colored and it was cool, and like everybody was fit. It was just like, it's like when viral, because it's like everyone is just seems healthy and fit. And so I know it's a bit of a rant, but when you talk about let's focus back on the health, not just the health care, that's where my brain goes. It's like, yeah, and no matter what we do, we got to get back to this place where, we give people the access and the education, but also the responsibility of their own health. No.
Although the guy you met in that hotel lobby, I think that's really who we're up against. I think in a lot of ways we think that it's hospital competition, so it's hospital versus hospital. In my early days of Geisinger, there was a quote from our leader of just it's not us versus the hospital down the road or us versus X practice or things. It's us versus cancer and us versus diabetes and chronic conditions, and so or us versus, I hate to say the word, but Doritos or whatever it is. Like, and I'm like a big milkshake guy. I eat enough ice cream to probably need some of these interventions and need some healthcare at some point. But and so I think we're all guilty of it. But I think some of that is that structure. So I think some of us, it's on us, and hopefully there's enough voices within the healthcare world of it's easy to start reading up on intricacies of the Affordable Care Act or intricacies of this network contract or different things. I think there's enough of us need to be reading up on and talking about and openly discussing of what are our food laws and how should healthcare leaders have a seat at the table when we're making really important decisions about social media and what's allowed and how it happens. Because it really is, it's us against the food scientist or us against the behavior scientist. That's really where the fight is, I think, for the future of health.
Yeah. And the flip side of that, by the way, and this was my other point that I wanted to move to, is that what's so wild is that because of the regulatory nature of healthcare and the red tapey nature of healthcare, we don't get to at least try to pull those same levers on the healthcare side. Like, here's an example, right? So at Proviva Health Group, we run a couple different prevention programs. One of them is like a remote patient monitoring program, right? And in order to be billable for RPM, the patient has to take at least 16 days of readings throughout the month. Okay. And so, are you familiar with Scott Adams? He's an author.
Not much.
Was he? I mean, this is, I don't know if you remember the Dilbert comics.
Oh yeah. Okay. Now I'm back.
And he's really great. And his lens on life is through like persuasion. As like a young man or a teenager, he took like a hypnosis classes and persuasion classes, and that's like his lens on life, and it's very interesting, and it's landed him in a whole bunch of hot water recently. He wrote a whole book on Trump called Win Bigly, and he's a fascinating guy. But I read a bunch of his books, and he talks about persuasion, he talks about habit building, he talks about all these really interesting things. And I really wanted to collaborate with him on my RPM program, because I was like, if I could get this guy to sit down with me and brainstorm on how we could literally like manipulate patients in a good way, not in a bad way, but to encourage basically to be intelligent about the way that we do this program, so that we build build them taking their vitals into their habit, into their workflow. Like, if I could get somebody that's really good at persuasion, help me tweak the words that we use to express the program to the patient, the way that we ask for things, the way that we advise them on how to, maybe it's as simple as the whole conversation should be, talk to me about your morning routine, and then finding a place in there that would be super organic for them to put the scale or the blood pressure, cough, and like whatever it is. But to get somebody that's like an expert at persuasion, to be part of the conversation for healthcare for a good purpose, that would be so cool. And I think that we don't do that at a really broad level. Like, we have so much data in healthcare, and I don't think we have the food scientists, quote unquote, of healthcare. I mean, I'd love to hear if I'm wrong, but I feel like we have such an opportunity to sit there and figure out, okay, if it's our responsibility to create a healthier population and to get better patient outcomes, then we should be sitting there with these, people that are really good at persuasion and figuring out how to get that done in like a food scientist-y way,
I love that. I'm all in on. Sounds like your startup number 2 or 3, whatever it is for you. Of I think those efforts, to your point, and there's a lot of discussion right now around. It's very easy to jump to the regulatory nature and say, like, we need this law or we need this. There's actually quite a few people I'm following and talking to in conversation that are like, we just need less laws in healthcare. So some of it is so regulated that if you took down some of the laws that are sort of anti-competitive or whatever that people are saying, then you get maybe a little bit more price transparency, or you get some of the free market principles where you're able to act as a consumer, and that's where that consumer behavior goes from. And so some of it might be a yes and. I think there have been a few higher profile sort of that behavioral change type, either consulting groups or technology that came in and said, like, this is what we're going to do. But I think at the end of the day, it's been very difficult to get consumers or healthcare patients essentially to act like consumers because they're so blind to the price. They don't have access to this. Their network only allows them these three choices. And so if your only three choices are these, it's hard to help you make a better decision.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, to be clear, when I say regulatory nature, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, it's so, it's basically regulation at this point is just meant for the big boys to do some regulatory capture and make things, convenient for everything to stay locked down. That's essentially the way I view it. But let's kind of pivot just a little bit and let's start talking about vision, because we started talking about this offline, and I think it's such a good conversation to have. And so you kind of started talking about the lack of vision for healthcare, and so let's kind of restart that conversation, because every word that you mentioned was gold. So go ahead.
Appreciate that. I was at Geisinger Health Plan actually when Dr. David Feinberg, in his first couple of years at Geisinger as CEO, when he spoke at one of the big healthcare conferences. And I think it was just him and I in this crowd of 10,000 people. So just a lot of people from Geisinger didn't end up coming to the show, whatever it was. And so I'm sitting like front row. He gets up to do this mega kickoff speech. And he said, put his hands in the air and said, if you come visit us at Geisinger right now and you get the explanation of benefits from our health plan, you can expect it to look like your grocery store bill. And he said, when you go to the grocery store, it says can of beans and chicken and whatever, and has the line item and the number or the price on it. And when you go to our health system and you access services, you get this jumbled, jargon-filled, multiple-page letter that doesn't make any sense. But if you come now, you're going to get something that looks like your grocery store bill. And I remember kind of looking around in the crowd like, wait a minute, like I live there. I've gone and accessed services. Like my EOB doesn't look like that. And when I went back just a couple days later, so you fly back home on Wednesday or whatever, the first meeting on my calendar was, and I worked at the health plan, had some oversight on the marketing side of things, was with our ultimate chief and VP of revenue cycle, ultimate chief financial officer, the health plan printing people, like all of the things. And it was this sort of all hands on deck meeting of, hey, Dr. Feinberg said at this meeting, this is what it looks like. What is that going to take? And how does it look like that? And so we actually re-engineered the entire explanation of benefits to be readable and to have codes that made sense to a person. And we did focus groups and we put pictures on it, and it was awesome. And that was kind of the first place that I felt like, all right, that was a vision that made people act in a way that like we figured out how to get that done. And I think right now, when you go through a main stage, either listening to main stage speakers, you go through exhibit halls, you talk to friends in healthcare, some people are just unbelievable dedicated, and you're reading healthcare books at night on your own time. You're hosting these conversations, all the things. But you can already start to project out over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of some of these people's careers. It's like healthcare, with all that we're building and all that we're working towards, will probably look fairly similar to what it looks like today. If we keep going at this rate and this pace, it's going to be maybe a little bit more affordable, a little bit more accessible, a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, whatever it is. But there's not really enough, I think, big vision in healthcare. There's a few examples. I think those forward pods, pretty controversial, but like the AI doctor in a box future of just their goal is to put healthcare everywhere on Earth. I wish there was a similar statement and vision of putting health everywhere on Earth. And so like, this is the thing that we're going to do to align, to your point, kind of personal responsibility and societal pressure and culture and all the ways. So I think we still haven't figured it out quite yet. I think we're still in that healthcare versus health debate. But I do wish, and hopefully I get to play a part in that. I think I try to be thoughtful about what could a healthier future look like, and what are the things, whether it's policy or procedures or technology or people arranged in a certain way, what are the things that are going to get us there?
Yeah. And kind of the example that you mentioned earlier was like, there's no Elon Musk of healthcare. There's nobody standing there, and by now it's already almost feasible because he's done so much of it. But when he started with the SpaceX stuff or anything else he's done, it's like, oh, we're going to colonize Mars. And by now we can already stretch our imagination to understand it, because he's, building these massive rockets that have taken off. And, but like 10 years ago or whenever he started. It's like, dude, what are you even talking about? But you know what? There was a guy that articulated a clear thing, and I can understand that. Like, I can understand the purpose, even if it seems super preposterous. I can understand his vision. And yeah, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any Elon Musk of healthcare. I mean, you mentioned Cuban earlier. He's taking on the pharmaceutical industry, and that's fantastic. But just the full transformation of the patient experience, you're right. Like everything, even the innovation seems mired in convolution and muddy waters. And like even the innovation is within the framework of this super, backwards, overly regulated system. And to your point, I haven't heard somebody with a real just like breath of fresh air that has the capacity. There's a lot of dreamers, but someone that actually has the capacity to do it and say like, this is the future. Like imagine this, and maybe it's Alex. Maybe it is.
One of the quotes I heard last weekend in talking the healthcare conversation was data is more valuable than your dollars. And what that meant was that data, which is kind of a big bet that I heard, which is something that sparked my interest for the first time in a little bit around that sort of bold vision, was your data is worth more than your dollars. And they were talking about specifically from a health plan premium standpoint of the amount of money that you or your family spend X per month on your healthcare premium to have health insurance. Your data spread out amongst all the different advertisers or biomedical or whatever it is worth more. And so it said, what if in the future you change the model and so you were paid or you had it free, your healthcare access to healthcare services because you were willing to sign over your data in a de-identified way or whatever it was. So you figure out how to monetize the data. But that's kind of a bet that I would love to see, whether it doesn't have to be that one, but something like that is just giving us sort of permission to dream and think about, wait a minute, if all of the advertisers and people and researchers are paying for this data to access it, what if that money went to the individual consumer? And what if in the future their healthcare wasn't tied to their employment? It was tied to the data signature and it was tied to the long-term study options and things. But that starts to paint a picture of then you all of a sudden have healthcare that's not tied to your employer. You have healthcare that you're not paying for out of pocket every month, which might spur some innovation from an entrepreneurship aspect. You have people that leave companies to go start companies, whatever it is. And so I think that's one of the types of ways of thinking of like, maybe that's true. I don't know. I haven't researched it yet. I haven't seen what the data's worth. I'm trying to think through it. But at least that was a conversation. I think to your point, it's going to take people to be able to say those things and then to back it up. And to say, okay, here's kind of that roadmap of here's how much it costs now, here's how much it could cost in the future, here's how much people are willing to pay for it, and here's that paradigm shift. I think we still really haven't figured out a way to your point of just all the startups get mired down into the big bad healthcare ecosystem. We still haven't figured out a way to pay for health. And so everything is just pay for healthcare. And so all of the startups, even from a diagnostic side mainly, are largely to diagnose something and then get you access to care. And there's some way to make money in that middle of it. I think the first person or people who figure out how to really societally incentivize health in a way that's so meaningful to an individual that we figure out how to make money from it, I think that's more important than anything we could do on Mars.
Okay. That is a super good point. Love that. And what I'm about to say does not solve for that. But my ideal vision that is not backed by any actual kind of practical roadmap is that you take away some of the levers that some of the fundamental things that are making things so expensive. So to me, two of those things are the administrative burden in healthcare, which is largely due to HIPAA, which I've said this a couple times on the past, and maybe I've been saying in a bit of a controversial way, but I think overall it's a scam because I think that our generation is completely okay with, we've become so okay with trading to your point, trading our data for convenience. We do it in every other sector of our life. There's no reason why we're still, and the funny thing is not like we're not giving our data. The health systems still have our data. They still get hacked. Those things still happen. And yet we don't actually get to appreciate the convenience that you would expect from 2024 as far as like, healthcare. And nor does the actual system. Like everything is, you got to log into a thing that logs into a thing that logs into a thing that sends you to factor authentication in order to see the message that says, thanks, I'll follow up next week. And you're like, you know. So anyway, but I digress. The point is, it has to be employer funded. Okay, so you create a system that people sign off of HIPAA, and so you still have just a standard. You have the standard encryption that you would expect from like your private communications. Like if you texted your wife or girlfriend or whatever, and I stole those messages, that would be a crime. And yet you could still pull out your phone and text them or WhatsApp them or video call them or whatever, and that's not a problem, right? So that. Plus, everyone signs a thing that they can't sue their doctor for more than like, let's say, $50,000. And then you take away the whole, malpractice insurance issue, which is a huge driver of cost, I think. And then the system practices value-based care. And between those three things, you have your incentives aligned and you take away a lot of the forced costs. I think you're probably in a much better place. But I have no idea how to actually do that.
You had me at the word scam. I love the word scam. I think people that know me, my kids even actually say hashtag scam when I say they can't have more ice cream or things after dinner. So that type of vision, and it sounds like it's more thought through than you even said. You sort of alluded to like, I haven't really thought this through, but it's that like it really is going to take the thoughtful spread of those type of ideas of, hey, here's the way it's currently done today. In the future, here's the way it could be done, and here are sort of the steps to get there. And are there enough people and are there enough experts that say, well, if you take apart this little piece of it, this opens up this next piece of it. So that, and very similar to that, your data is more valuable than your dollars conversation, is it does, to your point of modern life is littered with examples that we accept from a viewing history on our favorite social media app or whatever it is, or our shopping preferences, is we're being hit with big tech of anonymous behavior capture and all of the ways that we're online, and it reconciles that once it recognizes us and then hits us with that right advertisement because of how much it knows about us. And to your point, in healthcare right now, we're the only place we're really hit with an advertisement is like on a clipboard with a printed version, and you after you've filled out the digital form first. And exactly. So I think the future, hopefully there will be some of those trade-offs or some of that accepted. This is going to really benefit you and make your life easier. And especially it's so unfortunate that we get some of that service and opportunity in the parts of our lives that largely don't matter. When healthcare, largely if you're there, and I've had some both personal and family, just health, all the things health over these last few months. And some friends really that are going through just life-changing health challenges. And what we do to people during those life-changing health challenges, to them and their family, of fill out this form and go back to this, and you get hit with this bill that you never saw, and this, all this, that, and the other of healthcare. It's so unfortunate that we get such a great experience at the local car dealership or whatever it is now in life, and that we go through so much hassle during times where we really, really need it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Alex, as always, a truly insightful conversation. It's always such a pleasure to spend some time with you. I know people can definitely find you on LinkedIn. Alex is both vocal and also insightful over there. Where else can people find you?
In person in Miami, Florida. We're hosting a Young Health Leader Summit again this year. This is year 6. Bless you for what you said in the beginning. That we should probably rename it the Healthcare Friends Fest. It really is a couple hundred people that are great friends and new friends, hanging out, very casual dress code. So forced shorts and t-shirts in Miami, Florida. Get to hang out with your friends, talk healthcare for a few days. Really an entire event built around the people versus built around sponsors or exhibitors or different things. It really is all about this conversation and making it meaningful from a connection standpoint. And so can't wait. Word on the street and rumor says that you're going to be in Miami alongside us, right?
Possibly. Very much looking forward and highly, highly recommend. And so you can search up the Young Healthcare Leaders.
Young Health Leader Summit.
Young Health Leader Summit. And also find that in Alex's profile on LinkedIn. The link is there. You can sign up. Registration's open.
Registration is open.
Registration is open and almost closed because these tickets, they go like that. So let's make sure you jump on there, and look forward to seeing you in Florida.
Super excited about it. This was so much fun. Thanks for having me.